But you can even do the same thing with just like photos of everyday life, where
Yeah.
you look at the image and you go, what is a Bible lesson that can be pulled from this? So when I had photos of like rivers and stuff, it was able to, talk about flow and the flow of living water flowing into you and then back out of you.
Hello and welcome to the Digital Ministry Podcast, where we are having conversations about the stories and strategies of sharing God's love in the digital world. Now, here is your host, someone who believes pudding tastes better with a plastic spoon. This is Joshua Verwers.
All right, everybody, welcome to the podcast. I am Joshua Verwers. Thank you so much for being here with me. And, I'm excited today. I'm excited because this is a gentleman that we've got, a guest, and we are going to kind of be sharing about a platform we haven't discussed yet on this podcast. We're going to be talking about Instagram. Now, this gentleman is a pastor, a church planter, and a digital minister using Instagram to post encouraging devotionals. And so I just want you guys to welcome to the podcast, George Holleway. George, did I say that last name correctly?
Yes, you did.
All right, well, welcome.
Yes,
I'm glad to have you here.
Thanks. It's exciting to get to be on your show. I love what you're doing. It's conversations that are so much fun to have. I'm excited.
Yes, yeah. The whole concept behind this, obviously, was I wanted to share stories of people using, digital platforms for ministry, but also some of the strategies. And so we'll kind of get to some of that here in a little bit, because I see what you're doing on Instagram and you're crushing it. I mean, you just literally are. I absolutely love it. When I told my wife who I was going to be interviewing, she's like, no way, I follow him on Instagram. So
wow.
She might actually be more excited for this interview than any of the others that I've done, just because she follows your content and she loves it.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it was, and I never introduced you. It was none of that. She wasn't scouring my page trying to find different people that I follow. It was just, she found you and she loved it. And she's like, oh yeah, I follow him. And she's like, how did you find him? I was like, man, I've been following him for about a year now. I was like, where you been at?
Yeah, so, I mean, you're one of the OGs. You've been there since the beginning, since I started trying to do stuff with Instagram.
Yeah, and that's been the fun part for me, kind of setting almost like the fly on the wall, watching what you're doing, because early on, I think you and we were kind of part of a little group where just different Christians that were trying to use the platform for good. I was not as consistent as I know I need to be on Instagram, but I saw what you were doing and it was like, man, this guy I gotta follow. There were others that I kind of stopped following what they were doing, but not you. Seeing how you've been able to progress with the platform and it's expanded. I mean, the devotional content you're doing is just, it's getting more rich, more fulfilling, more informative, and definitely more encouraging on that. So,
man, that's so cool to hear. Thank you for that encouragement.
Yeah. Okay. So for people that have never met you before, have no idea who you are, I've done a little, I mean, obviously I know you a little bit from kind of stalking you online. But you and I have a lot of similarities, as in, I think I just heard a recent interview you did, and you were talking about some of your past, what got you into ministry in the first place. And similar to me, where you kind of knew you were supposed to be in ministry from a young age, 7 years old, if I remember right? Is that about right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. 7 years old.
So tell us about that. Tell us about what kind of led you in, and then even the process that's also similar to me, where you had that rebellious nature of wanting to run away from God for a while, and what led you back to the church. So give us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so you summarized that pretty good. I first said that I wanted to be a pastor when I was 7 years old. I don't think I really knew what it meant. I'm still not sure I really know what it means, but it was, our church was one of those, you don't see it as often anymore, but it was one of those where in the middle of the service, instead of sending the kids off to children's church, at this point, they would bring all the kids up to sit in front of the altar on the steps, and the pastor would sit down, and they're all gathered around the pastor, and he would have some sort of an object lesson for the kids. And this particular day, he was asking kids what they wanted to be when they grew up, and there were a bunch of kids saying things like, I want to be, a lawyer. I don't think anybody said lawyer, but like a doctor, an astronaut. Right. I want to be, a unicorn, astronaut, kitten, whatever. Right? Yeah. Like all these like kid responses, and then it gets to me, and Pastor Mark puts the mic up to me, and I said, I want to be a pastor. And I had never said that before, ever in my life. And so the adults around my parents were like, did you hear that? That was your son. And my parents were like, no, not George. George doesn't want to be a pastor. He's not a pastor kind of person, right? Yeah. And the truth is, and I think you mentioned you listened to that interview. I shared this with him too. I think that's kind of been my perspective on me feeling called to be a pastor for a lot of my life as well, where I'm like, no, not me. That can't be right. And I'm so thankful for those people in my life who made sure that I didn't give that calling up, because I really wanted to. I had real bad Jonah syndrome, where pastoral ministry was my Nineveh, and I wanted to go anywhere but there. I wanted to find the next ship to Tarshish and set sail. Mm-hmm. But I had a teacher who was a retired pastor, Bobby Frazier, who really spoke into that a lot and had a huge degree of influence on me ending up deciding to pursue ministry. The funny thing about that, though, is that influence he had didn't actually result in me actually pursuing ministry actively until several years after he died. It was his influence that stuck with me and like ate at me, just about, like it haunted me for the next several years after he died. And I found myself graduating college and going, all right, I guess this is what I'm supposed to do. So wow. That's so, I didn't think that was gonna be me, but it ended up being what God brought me to. Right. Yeah. No. Okay. So you're talking about that and how you finally made that decision. What did the next couple years look like? The next few years, getting from that point of making that decision to then planting your church? Yeah. So right as I was about to turn in the capstone project for my undergrad, part of the capstone was writing a thesis. So I had to write a thesis, and I decided to write a thesis about the practice of religion on the internet, because during my college years, it was the darkest time of my life. I sank into a horrible battle with depression and anxiety, bad enough that there were days I didn't leave my house. It was the darkest time of my life, and in the middle of that, I found hope through a Google search for God and depression. Wow. And I found a Life Church online church service where Pastor Craig was talking about how God and Jesus and grace relates to some of the common issues and struggles that come along with depression and anxiety. And it spoke right into me, right in the middle of a coffee shop when I was studying and just breaking down. And so I kept attending for a good couple of years after that. And so then when it came time to write a thesis, I was like, I've got to write about this because it just fascinated me. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote this thesis, and right as I was about to turn that thesis in, I got a call from one of the elders at my home church where I had grown up. He said, "Hey, my name's Aaron. We haven't met before. I'm a new elder, but your name was given to me as maybe the right guy to talk to about this." I'm still not sure who gave him my name or why they thought I was the guy to talk to about it. But he was like, "I have this crazy idea, and I want to talk with you about it. But I don't want to tell you what it is until we're in person. So can you meet me for breakfast?" I'm like, "I'm in College Station. You're in Tomball. That's an hour away. Sure, whatever. I'll meet you for breakfast. As long as you're buying, I'll meet you." Right. And so I drove down there, and he cuts pretty much straight to the chase, and he just says, I think we need to figure out how to do church on the internet. We've got like Amazon selling stuff on the internet, Walmart's doing stuff on the internet, we're watching TV on the internet. We got to figure out a way how to do church on the internet." And I just started laughing. And he goes, no, hold on, just hang in there with me. I know it seems crazy, but just hear me out. And I'm like, no, man, you don't understand. That's not why I'm laughing. I don't think you're crazy. You just have no idea that I'm about to turn in a thesis on this idea.
On this, yeah.
It was just such a God thing, and like, I ended up quitting one of my jobs and going, and he paid me for a couple of months to work out of his like financial consulting office to develop a business plan for how to build an online church. And then we took that to my home congregation, presented it to everyone that needed to approve it, and then before I knew it, I was functioning as an online pastor and enrolled in seminary. And it was like this whirlwind of like, whoa, I never thought I would ever, like, I know God told me, it felt like God told me, that I needed to be a pastor, but I never really actually wanted to. Right. Definitely never thought I was going to be doing online ministry.
Yeah.
And it just total God thing. But then you asked, how I got to where I am now. To shorten, that's actually a really long story, but to shorten it, basically, my wife and I realized that that role for me wasn't going to be a good long-term fit. So we just started praying about what the next step would be and when that next step would need to happen. And we were just really open with God and told him, like, we'll do anything you want us to do. We'll go wherever you want us to go. We had some real exciting opportunities that would have required moving across the country. We prayed about those. And the one thing we said to God was, we don't want to start a church.
Yeah, it's never a good idea to tell God what you don't want to do.
Exactly. And so during those months, there were 4 different men who I really respected that came to me and asked me, they're independent of one another, if I would consider planting a church. I told them all no, of course, because I'd already been clear with God. So clearly they weren't coming on God's behalf. That was them. They didn't know what they were talking about, right? So I told them all no. But then a couple of them had the guts to come and ask a second time. And so once the second one asked me a second time, I was like, okay, maybe I need to take the hint. This might be God telling me to do something.
Yeah.
So I started looking into it, and then before I knew it, same kind of whirlwind type of situation. Before I knew it, I was doing it. Before I had even hardly convinced myself that it was something I even wanted to do. And don't get me wrong, like, I want to. It's great. It's exciting. But at the time, I hadn't convinced myself of that yet. And it just was like, whoa, I'm doing it. It was just the way God works sometimes is just crazy.
and we're talking, you didn't plant a online, you planted an offline, a physical church.
Right. Yeah. So we're not even totally planted yet. In fact, we're still in the building the launch team phase. Yeah. We're not even meeting on Sundays. So there's still a lot of work ahead of us. It's still yet to see if it'll pan out, but I believe God's in it, and I think he's going to make it happen.
That's awesome. Okay, so in the plans of this, launching this, doing all the prep, you're obviously having lots of discussions. Are you guys planning on having an online component to the church, so being both online and offline?
Yeah, so it depends on to what degree and when we're talking.
Okay.
Years down the road, if this church ends up being a successful enough church to be able to add a strong church online experience, then yeah, like we want to do that because I really believe in the power that has. Out the gate, that's just not something that is right now that seems like a feasible thing to do. Yeah. So instead, when it comes to church online, I think it's less about like the actual product of church online and more about the purpose behind it, which is just meeting people where they are, being present where they're already present. And so that for us is just having a strong digital strategy that we're in the process of implementing to make it stronger. And that's actually something I do for a number of churches. I do the manage the digital presence for several churches in the Houston area, and so I kind of get to learn from what they're doing and experiment on a few different churches and see kind of what works.
Right, kind of test them out, and they get to be the guinea pigs, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm just kind of following where this goes. One of the things that I've been wrestling with, because I've got a small church that we've got here in South Central Iowa, and you're in Texas, right?
Yep.
Okay. And so one of the things that we kind of go back and forth with wrestling on is our online presence. And for a while, we were streaming the Sunday morning services, and I keep wrestling with that concept of, should we be streaming those at all? I'm not opposed to having the video posted online, but should we be streaming it live? And in streaming it live, is that going to give people an excuse to stay at home and not actually show up? Is that too easy for the Christian? And should we be making it easy? What are your thoughts on that? Have you kind of wrestled with this thought? Yeah, give me your thoughts, your opinions.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a common objection or concern to live streaming, to church online in general. It's valid. That's something that you have to think about. And depending on how you do it, that very much can be the reality. The way that it's often asked to me is, isn't church online just for lazy Christians?
Okay.
And my answer is always yes. Of course it is.
I love the honesty.
Of course it is. And that's a good thing. Because Because here's the thing. If someone is already at the point where they don't find value in the physical gathering enough to go there instead of watching online, it's only a matter of time before they just stop going to church at all.
Yeah.
Because they already don't see the value in it. So what church online and streaming, if you do it right, gives the opportunity to do is engage those people who are infrequent attenders or disconnected when they're not at church. Because the most likely people to be attending online in your local community who could be going to your church is two groups of people. One, onlookers who are checking you guys out, seeing if maybe this is the place for you. And two, the lazy Christians, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
And so it gives them the opportunity, the people who are already probably not going to be in church every Sunday, to actually stay connected with church every Sunday. So when they're at the lake house fishing, the dad who doesn't usually lead his family in spiritual matters says, hey, why don't we pull out the phone while we're on the boat and watch church for a minute? Let the poles sit in the pole holder, and when the fish bite, we'll reel it in. But in the meantime, let's watch church together. So now all of a sudden they're having church on a boat out in the middle of a lake while on vacation, and the dad gets to lead his family in that, which makes the wife feel more secure. The kids feel more like there's an example that they can look to in their own family, and now they're more connected. And if you're doing it right, then you've got follow-up with them from someone in your church community locally who's able to make that connection so that now they want to go and say hi to Joe who emailed them back about their prayer request this week.
Yeah. That's good. That's really good. And the reason I wanted to ask you about this is because you have a unique perspective on this. As you just shared with us, it was the online church, the church online platform that got you in, that really brought you back. I mean, like you said, you just Googled God and depression, and it led you to that. Had that not happened, I mean, we can play the what if games, all of these, but you have that unique perspective of being one of those people where church done right online, it worked.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So, yeah, I love that. Now, the other thing you had said, and here's maybe one of the keys, and I had heard this quote, I can't even remember who I heard it, and I wish I could. Maybe by the time we actually publish this, I'll be able to give proper credit. But it was, somebody had said for a long time that the church is actually the hope of the world. And somebody came back and they said it's actually church done right is the hope for the world. And that's the thing. And who'd you say it was? Bill
Hybels was the original one.
Yeah. Bill Hybels. And I know what he was saying in that. He wasn't saying church done wrong, obviously. But it's sad that in our age, we have to clarify done right. And you did that. You're like, streaming, if done right. And that's really the big reason why our church, we don't do the streaming anymore, more so than the questions and debates. Because I was still having these debates, and I'm like, I would rather err on the side of I might be able to reach a George Holloway out there that is searching and looking. I would rather err on that side by putting it out there, but we didn't have any type of mechanism in place that if somebody actually hops online and has a question, how do we respond? If they have an immediate prayer need, how do we do that? And that's what we just didn't have in place. And I think that's not doing it right. Would you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Thankfully, with digital technology, like there are very easy and scalable ways to implement things like that. But it is one of those where, especially if you're a church of smaller resources, primarily in human resources, because it doesn't require a lot of financial resources. But if you're a church that's smaller in human resources, it is it's harder. That's the same reason we're not going to start with that either, because we just don't have the ability to do it right yet. And it's the same kind of deal where, like, when you're evaluating when you're going to launch a church plant, you have to ask, like, when is the time to do it right? Because you get to do it once.
Yeah.
And you want to be sure that you do it in a way that is good, because it is the church done right that is the hope of the world.
Yeah, yeah. All right, you said two other things earlier that I want to kind of come back to. One of them, you said that part of the whole concept behind doing any type of church, any type of ministry online, is going where people are at. Is that what led you to, because I've seen you dabble a little bit on other social platforms, but you're pretty well all in on Instagram. Is that kind of what led you to Instagram, seeing where kind of like your target demographic was at?
Yeah, so it became that. It started more just like trial and error, where, like, I tried Twitter, I tried Facebook, I tried Instagram, and it worked. And the reason it worked is because that's where attention is right now. That Instagram is where the activity and the engagement is at. It's where the eyeballs are. So yes, the answer to your question is yes. It's because that's where the people are. I wanted to be present there. It happened by trial and error. I wish I could say that was a brilliant decision on my part, but it was just I kind of discovered it was like, wow, this is where people are, and people want to listen to what I have to offer here. This is cool.
Yeah. No, I love that answer, because I think that'll give hope to other Christians out there that are looking for options for digital ministry. We've had a few guests on already that they've kind of emphasized on YouTube, and primarily because I've already created those relationships and I know them because of my emphasis on YouTube up to this point. But it was very much similar to me in why I did that. I was trying to do them all, but I found the most success with YouTube, that all of a sudden it was like what I was putting out there, it was just resonating. People were commenting, they were being engaged. And I was like, all right, well, this is working and I've obviously got a knack for it, so let's try it. Not to say I'm not in and very much interested in Instagram, because that's exactly like you said. It's there. I mean, people are there right now and they are engaging. Now, from an outside perspective, I look at Instagram and I see lots of pictures of food and lots of pictures of selfies. How do we do Instagram right? You're talking about doing it right. So if we're going to try to use Instagram as our digital platform for a digital ministry, how do we do it right? What are you doing? What are you finding to be the right way of doing things?
I think one of the things that I've started to notice is that anytime you can speak into where there is deception or darkness or discouragement in the same arena where people find those things, and struggle with those things, then there's power in that. Like if you were to go to a bar and talk about drunkenness, there's a different level of interaction and application that happens there. So when you go onto Instagram and you see food and vacation photos and selfies that are all, the right filters and touched up, and basically Twitter is random thoughts and rants, right? And then Facebook is just the garbage can of the internet. And
that's great.
And then Instagram is the fake life. That's what it is. Like that's what Instagram is known for being, is filters, right?
Right.
Hashtag no filter is like this thing that we pride to put on something, because it's like, my life is so great. All of your photos need filters, but mine doesn't, because it's that great, right? If that's just the culture that's been built on Instagram by being a primarily visual platform. So what that leads to is feelings of missing out, feelings of being less than, of not measuring up, not being enough. It causes a lot of social anxiety where kids are seeing their friends hang out with their friends and they weren't invited, or they're comparing themselves to this Instagram model, and they're feeling like they're not pretty enough, or like they're not a good enough wife because they don't cook the crazy awesome meals that her husband posts about. And they're not doing the whole couples goals thing. Like, it's like it causes so much discouragement, and there's deceit and messages that aren't truthful and aren't true to who Jesus says that we are. That when you get to go on into that same place that all of that happens, and say, no, this is who Jesus says you are. You're valuable. These are things that you can do to start recognizing those God's realities for yourself. There's power there, and being able to go into that and just speak straight into the core issues that you find in wherever the platform is that you're trying to reach people.
So how is it that you're doing that? How do you speak straight into that? Because Instagram is photos. I mean, that's what it is. It's grand. I mean, that's the platform. Pictures. You're posting pictures. How do you speak to the deceit, the discouragement, the darkness, as you said, with photos? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I use photos and captions a bit differently than how maybe you would think to when you think Instagram. I use it as like a microblog, where the image is like your YouTube thumbnail. It's the clickbait. It's what's going to get you to stop scrolling.
Ooh, I like that.
When I make an image for Instagram, I'm thinking, one, if someone only read this, does this give them hope? Because I'm putting text on those images. So if someone only read the text on that image, does this give them hope? And two, does it intrigue them enough to read what I write in the caption? And then three, is it enough to make them, really, that's the first part, is does this design, it's less about the content, more about the design. Does the design make them stop in their tracks to see what in the world is happening? And so reining that back in, the image is like the clickbait thumbnail, right? That hopefully offers a bit of encouragement as well. But then the caption, you mentioned that I do devotionals. That's where those devotionals go. And sometimes they're short, sometimes they're long, sometimes they're real in depth. Sometimes it's just a list of Bible verses to remind people what God's promises are, or to encourage them.
Oh, that's good.
But using that real estate is fascinating to me, because it's an underused piece of real estate on Instagram. The caption is.
Okay. All right. Now, would you say that, because you do put text on top of the images that you're doing as well, for somebody that maybe isn't as tech savvy, doesn't have, the know-how, the knowledge to do it, is there still a way for them to just put an image, keeping the caption underneath, but in just an image alone that could help lead to that? Have you seen people doing that? What would you say for that?
Yeah, actually. So there's one really, really good example of that, and I've done it myself. Dave Adamson, at Aussie Dave, he takes his, he's a phenomenal photographer, and he uses his photography and relates a Bible story to those images. And actually, I discovered he was doing that after I started doing that myself. I knew about him, but I didn't know he was doing that on Instagram. Mm-hmm. And I started doing that when I went on vacations, where there was, photos of ruins and of mountains and valleys and just, really cool imagery. But you can even do the same thing with just like photos of everyday life, where you look at the image and you go, what is a Bible lesson that can be pulled from this? So when I had photos of like rivers and stuff, it was able to, talk about flow and the flow of living water flowing into you and then back out of you. Or like with the photos of the ruins, I got to talk about legacy. What's the message you're leaving behind for people later? things like that, just getting creative with it. And part of me misses when I did that, because that's just not what I do anymore.
Right.
And I still love taking photos. I took them all with my phone, but I still love mobile photography, and I just don't really share them anymore. But I like the clickbaity images too, so I still have fun with that.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, because I've bounced back and forth with a few different varieties on my own Instagram, trying the images on top, similar to what you've done. I never liked the way they looked for me. Some of them I loved, others I didn't. I've tried kind of maybe the Aussie Dave route of doing some of that. But I think the thing that you just said that finally clicked in my mind was, one, you're doing this devotion. It's almost like you're doing a mini sermon, and you're using that photo as a sermon illustration to kind of reinforce the point that microblog, the description content, is really doing.
For sure. Yeah. It's because there's something powerful about an image that can help it to stick in your mind. One of my favorites was had this photo of, you could see the top of a mountain and the bottom of the valley. And I just got to talk about how the view always seems better from the mountaintop, but there's always more life in the valley.
That's awesome.
And so just getting to just encourage people, like, look, if you feel like you're in a valley, take the time to enjoy that there's a richness there that can happen that you just don't get on the mountaintop.
Oh man, that is so good. Now, how much do you think that we as Christians, especially with Instagram being fake, how much more real do we need to be on there?
Oh, radically more real. The thing about, like we talked about it earlier, Instagram is a place where there's a lot of fake. There's a lot of pretend.
Yeah.
And to just be honest about where you're at in life and what's happening, kind of the unfiltered, that sticks out because it's not what people are used to seeing on the platform. And people find it refreshing. I mean, Think about whenever, like, someone, like, let's say that there's someone you look up to, right? Like if it's Craig Rochelle, right? So let's just use him as an example, because I've noticed this from him. Yeah. Where he'll have an Instagram story of him and his daughter just like reading, or like there's like some mess in the kitchen, or like it's like, oh, he's a guy, and it makes him more relatable.
Yeah, he puts his pants on the same way we all do, just one leg at a time, and at least I think. I don't know. He's kind of athletic. He might be able to jump into them, but but yeah, that's one of those things that I've seen on. Obviously, I focus more on YouTube, but I've seen the same thing where, especially this generation that is coming up, that's rising up, they want real. Because they can relate to real. They don't want the polish. I actually just had another friend that I admire so much, and he just flat out told me, he's like, Josh, even your videos are too polished. I want to rub the polish off of you. You need to be real. And I'm like, man, how much more real can I get? But that's good, because they are craving that. Do you think that's because the church has put on too much of a facade in years past?
I think it's not just the church. I think that, if you look at brands, they're all trying to have a more authentic feel as well. We're kind of just reacting, especially millennials, we're reacting against the kind of boomer mentality that loves a show, loves a production, for things to be really polished. We don't mind sitting on a broken couch in a coffee shop. Like, we care more about the coffee. And so same kind of thing. We don't mind so much production quality that's not crazy, polished, as long as the coffee, the substance, the good stuff is there.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. I like that. I want to kind of flip this a little bit on you, because you were talking about doing things right. So I want to toss this completely on its head, and let's take the other aspect. When it comes to Instagram and Christians who are trying to use that platform, ideally for good, ideally for kingdom purposes, what do you see being the biggest mistake that Christians are doing on Instagram?
Ooh, That's a hard question. I don't know if it's the biggest mistake, but one of the ones that irritates me the most is a in-your-face, like slam with the law type of presence.
Okay.
I feel like people go through life already not feeling good enough, and so we don't need to remind them of that. They already feel it. They already know it. And there are some that don't. They need to be woken up. And so we have to do that gently.
Yeah.
And it's more of a problem on Facebook than Instagram.
Right.
You see a lot of just slamming the other side, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
And it's just, that's not beneficial. It's not helpful. But I'll add something that's less of a personal peeve and more of actually a prevalent problem that I see, and that is just promotion, where our churches, social media, even some of our pastors are all come to this, sign up for this, come to this, do this, add value to my church, right? Rather than let me add value to your life. Here's something to encourage you today. Here's something to build your faith.
Yeah.
We should be adding value 5 times as often as we're asking for value.
That's good.
And I'm guilty of it. I've done it. In fact, if you go to our church's Instagram right now, the 3 most recent posts are all value asks. I shouldn't have done that, but I did. It's tempting. Yeah. It's so easy to do because that's the thing that's on our mind. But we have to remember that's not what's on other people's minds.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's something that I know. It's something that I see, but I don't. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, offline we were talking about, Gary V, which some of his language of choice, obviously, we wouldn't condone, but the principles behind what he teach as far as marketing, which obviously the church needs to be aware of marketing, and really, each and every one of us should be. I look at this and I see that there is a false sense of humility that so many Christians do where we don't want to make our name great. And yet I can even look back on like Abraham, where God gives him that promise in Genesis 12. And he says, I will bless you. I'll make you a great nation. I will make your name great and you will be a blessing to others. And really, that's all about creating influence. It's the old John Maxwell quote that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And they really only know that you care when you're giving them value rather than trying to take it from them. And so I love that because with that false sense of humility, we sit there and say, well, I don't want to be known. I want Jesus to be known. Okay, Abraham had a great name that God made. But yet, even today, we still call God the God of Abraham. It was through Abraham people got to know God. It's through Josh that people get to know God. It's through George that people get to know God. And why is that a bad thing? If we're just letting God use us, it's ultimately pointing to Him. And if that means we have 100 followers, great. If we have 10,000 followers, great. If all we're doing is trying to give more of God, we should probably be giving a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah. I mean, and another great example is that Paul signed his letters. Like, he was writing the Bible and he signed it.
Paul. I love that. It is so true. It really is. It is. Yeah. That's just so good. Okay. So, a couple things that I wanted to, as we get ready to wind down. One of them, digital ministry. Us trying to really share God's love, encourage people to live out their faith and have a genuine relationship with God. When we're doing that in a digital platform, we talked about it earlier where the person receiving it, especially from an online church setting, yes, that helps out the lazy Christian. It's an easier entry method. I'm hearing from a lot of ministers, I couldn't do that because that's too hard. Is that really just a fallacy? Because to me, isn't doing digital ministry actually easier than physical ministry?
In some regards, yeah. What they're really expressing isn't that it's too hard; it's that it's unknown.
Okay.
They think that it's too hard, but that's just because it's uncomfortable, it's unknown, and anything that feels uncomfortable and unknown feels hard.
Yeah.
But as the truth is that the barriers that exist in digital ministry are so few compared to offline ministry that, like, if you're doing offline ministry and you're doing well and you're adding value to people's lives, and people, a good metric is, are people coming to you with their problems, right? Then you can do digital ministry. That's easier. You don't have, it's rarely someone that's like an offline ministry. You may get a call and have to drive to their house like immediately, right?
Yeah.
Or you got to meet them for coffee like right now. With digital ministry, like, while you're waiting for your next appointment at the coffee shop, you're replying to someone who has a question about God through an Instagram DM, and it helps to multiply your ministry capacity and benefits your local ministry because people know they can reach you outside of just Sunday at church.
Right. That is good. Along that, with being able to reach people, being able to connect with people, and still minister to them in an online capacity rather than just the offline, you had talked about how you're really a product of digital ministry and how that kind of led you in. So you're a great testimony for, Life Church and the church online platform they have. Have you, through this Instagram ministry have you had one of those? Is there a story that you can share where you've been able to kind of impact somebody's life like that, and you've been able to reach out to a George, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of my favorite stories, I don't know that it's exactly the same vein as my story was, but
right.
I was actually still doing church online at the same time, and it was somewhat related to that, but it happened through Instagram. There was a guy from the Gambia of West Africa who heard about Jesus in a movie that he stumbled across. It's a 100% Muslim area, and he started doing some research online about Jesus, and he decided he needed to talk with a pastor about learning more about Jesus. So he went to, as the first place he went to Instagram and started messaging every pastor he could find.
Wow.
And I was the only one that replied. That's what he said. And so we started talking about Jesus, and we were literally starting from square one, where he was like, "What's a disciple?" I asked him, if he had been baptized, and he's like, "What's a baptized?" And it's like literally like square one.
Wow, that's
all
amazing.
The way back to like bare basics. And what ended up happening was, through the course of several weeks of going back and forth with them through text message, chat on like direct message, and WhatsApp video calls, he ended up coming to believe in Jesus. And he was taking everything I was saying and relaying it to his 6 sisters, and all 6 of them came to believe in Jesus and were all baptized.
That is so good. Oh man, if that doesn't get people stirred up in their hearts right now, thinking there are so many human beings out there in the world that God loves, that are in a lost and dying position, and they just need somebody to share his radiant love with them. Man, if that doesn't stir us up to get on whatever social platform we can and start doing that, I'm not sure I know what will. What would you say to encourage the Christian out there to step out and to start sharing God's love digitally?
Start trying. I think one of the bigger barriers I've heard from people, and it was one I experienced myself, to like actually stepping out and starting to do ministry under your name, like under like who you are, is a feeling of like being pretentious. Like who am I to think that my voice is something that people would want to listen to?
Right.
Who am I to think that I have something of value to offer that they couldn't get by just following one of the thousands of pastors that are already on Instagram. And what helped me to break through that was just trying. I just started with Twitter, and I just was putting out these little thoughts. It felt super pretentious at first. It's like, my friends are going to think that I'm full of myself, and like, oh, there's George with his little nugget of wisdom again. Like, that's how I envisioned it.
Right.
But it resonated, and all of a sudden, before I knew it, I had built a small audience on Twitter, and I was like, well, this is interesting. I wish I could say more.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know if I really want to do that on Facebook, where all of my friends and family are. Let's try Instagram, where I've just got a couple hundred. Let's just do that. And so I started doing that, and I set a goal of reaching 1,000 followers by the end of the year. That was in April of last year. I was like, man, if I can reach 1,000 by the end of this year, this would be great. And by November, I hit 10,000.
Yeah.
It just, and like, the thing is, like, there's part of me that doesn't like sharing that, because not everyone is going to find that sort of like number validation.
Right.
But that's part of what helped for me, was just seeing like, hey, it was a sign of fruit. That's what it was for me. So I was looking for things like that, things like, hey, thanks for sharing this. This is what I needed today. Those little micro interactions of like, okay, so this is valuable. I'm not just being pretentious and satisfying my own vanity. This is actually valuable to somebody.
Yeah.
And so if you're thinking about doing this, like if you're a Christian, if you're a creator, and you're thinking about taking your voice, taking your skill, whatever that is, and putting it out there for people, realize that God gave you that for a reason, and then watch for those micro interactions where people says, wow, this is what I needed. Thank you for sharing this. Because that's when you know, okay, this was something I needed to do.
Yeah, that's good. I love that. Especially, and you have got that heart, the true heart of God, where it's, okay, so you're over 10,000 followers at this point, but you're concerned about each individual one. And if you can reach one, man, isn't it worth it? If it's just that one guy that you reached, and now all of a sudden his siblings, or the one person that they just needed that word of encouragement because they were looking at all these other selfies and they were getting discouraged. And here's a real photo of you that provided the encouragement they needed. We've got this platform. We've got the ability. There's such great potential. And like you said, the barrier to entry is nothing. I mean, it really is. If you're listening to this podcast, you already have the entry method. So it's like, whether it's on a computer or whether it's on your phone, you're hearing this and you've got exactly what you need to do that in your hands. So, man, I love that. I'm stirred up. Now I got to get busy on Instagram. So
you got it.
Okay, so here we're going to do, this is one of my favorite segments that we do. It is called The Fast Five, where I am going to ask you 5 absolutely random questions that have nothing to do with anything, and I want your initial reactions as fast as you can. George, are you ready for the Fast Five?
Ready as I'm gonna be.
All right, question number 1. If you could travel back in time, what period would you go to?
Oh, wow, that's a fascinating question. I think just to satisfy my own curiosity, I would want to go like way, way, way back to right before the flood. I want to know who the Nephilim were. I want to know what the kind of craziness was happening. I want to see Noah build the ark.
Okay, question 2. Why can't we tickle ourselves?
Oh, gosh. I have no idea. You're right. You can't. It's...
I'm not sure there's actually an answer to that one. Okay, question number 3. What is for dinner tonight?
I actually haven't decided yet, and I really should know because I'm having my church staff over, and we're making dinner for them, and I have no idea what it's going to be. And we might end up ordering pizza, but okay. I'm leaning towards chicken fajitas.
Ooh, chicken fajitas. That's a good choice. I like that. So, okay, how many friends of yours are redheads?
Probably, I don't know, ballpark at 10.
And our final question of the Fast Five, what is the maximum number of spritzes of perfume or cologne you can have without it being too much?
Ooh, probably 3.
Okay, there we go. All right, well, that was George Holloway with the Fast Five. George, I just want to thank you so much for being on here with us. If people are wanting to connect with you online, where can they do so at? What are your handles? What's your contact information? Give us all of the details.
Yeah, so my social security number is... I'm kidding. The best way to reach me would be my Instagram. That's at george.holloway. We spell our last name different than most do. I'm sure Joshua will have it in the show notes somewhere.
We'll have it in there.
But it's HOLLEWAY. We're the only family in the world that spells it that way. But Instagram's the best way, and you can find everywhere else from there.
All right, perfect. Any other parting words that you got for the audience? The platform is yours.
Man, if you're thinking about making that step to start making a kingdom impact through digital media, the best way to get started is just to get started. Start sharing something. Even if it's just something to kind of build your confidence that people even want to see something spiritually related from you, just share some Bible verses. Like, do something, because something's better than nothing, and we need more voices speaking into the chasm of the internet.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's so good. Hey, everybody, I just want to thank you so much for joining George and I on this conversation. It has been fun, and we've enjoyed having you here, listening and taking part. If you want to connect with us, obviously, you can catch him on Instagram at George Holloway. We'll have all of the details down in the description below. If you need to connect with me, you can pretty much do so anywhere there is a platform out there at Joshua Verwers. Also, if you would like to support this online ministry that I got going and really make sure that I can keep providing this content, you could support this on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/Joshua Verwers. And that's all I got for you. So until next time, I just want you all to stay blessed and enjoy God's best, and have a great week.